With Bryson Graham getting his front office together, now the shift is to finding the next head coach, as a list of candidates got reported by Jake Fisher yesterday. On today's episode, I want to break down what Sean Sweeney, Micah Nori, Dave Bliss, Tiago Splitter, James Borrego, and Wes Unseld Jr. could bring if any of those guys are named as the next head coach of the Chicago Bulls. We're going to talk about that. Plus, we're going to talk about the risers and fallers of the NBA draft combine and how it impacts the Chicago Bulls, namely at pick number 15. We're going to talk about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. So many people will know, last night, it was released the 6 candidates that are expected to be finalists for the Chicago Bulls' next head coaching spot that's open. And this was something that we were all waiting for, right? Like, after the hiring of AC Law and Steven Mervis, it just seemed like the next logical step was to lock in and solidify your head coaching role. Now, the Bulls have a lot of different options here that were reported by Jake Fisher. We're going to go through all of those guys. But with those 6 names on the that are connected now to the search, 8, if you talk about the 2 that Jake Fisher released later on, they said they also could be part of the Chicago Bulls head coaching search. This hire has to align with the rebuild, the roster, the draft strategy, and this coach cannot just be a name, right? I've already seen some Bulls fans kind of upset of some of the names that were left off this. This isn't about finding the best name. This is about finding the right person for this job, right? This isn't just about hiring a coach. This is about hiring the voice that brings Bryson Graham's vision to life every single day with how they operate and move throughout this team. So with that said, I want to talk about each of these candidates and their strengths. Number 1, Sean Sweeney, right? Sean Sweeney is somebody who currently right now is with the San Antonio Spurs, and he's been given a lot of credit for the X's and O's and adjustments that team makes. He has a strong defensive reputation, right? That is where his reputation lies, but even in doing some of my research, it's not just defense. He's actually calling some of those adjustments on the offensive side of the ball as well. One of the things that he's known for is accountability, preparation, and player development as well. He's worked with players like Giannis Antetokounmpo, like Derek Lively, of course, a number of Stephen Cassell and the other guys that are young with that Spurs team, right? The biggest concern with him, if you're looking for any concern, and I'll list concerns with all of these guys, is really that he has no head coaching experience. Other than that, everything that you see about Sean Sweeney from an X's and O's standpoint, it makes so much sense. And the fact that he comes from an organization like the San Antonio Spurs, to me, it does say like the Bulls, between, another guy being from OKC on this list and stuff like that, like you're seeing that the Bulls are really trying to go with people from good organizations. Now, that does not always work. I want to be clear here. It does not always work poaching from winning organizations. Hell, we poached from a winning organization with AK, Billy Donovan. He had had a well over 50% win percentage in OKC. If you're not going to support the coach and get them what they need, no matter how good or bad a coach is, they're not going to be able to succeed, right? When you look at Sean Sweeney, he's worked with the Nets, the Bucks, the Pistons, the Mavericks, and the Spurs. And multiple stops with Jason Kidd, which is the guy he's been behind a lot, right? But of course, some of his most notable work came in Milwaukee and Dallas, where he's heavily involved in turning the defense around in both those spots. This is a guy in Sean Sweeney that was credited from turning the Milwaukee Bucks from one of the league's worst defenses to one of the best defenses. He's been given the credit for that, which is kind of similar to how Tom Thibodeau and the reputation that he had around that. And so I think that bringing the defense, the culture of toughness, structure, and accountability, that's what Sean Sweeney would definitely bring to this team. And so there you go. That's what you look at for in regards to that one. And like I said, the biggest downside of concern would be is that he's never been a full-time NBA head coach. And, for some, that doesn't matter. You want a new, young, dynamic mind. You don't want to go back to the same well that all NBA teams do. And, there's some questions about what his offense would look like, but I hearing that he's did some of the adjustments even for the Spurs offense, it makes me feel pretty confident in that. The next guy up to talk about is Micah Nori. Now, this is another guy that's been around the league for a very, very, very long time, right? But Micah Nori is somebody who's been a career assistant, sometimes, 20 over 20 years in the NBA as an assistant. And, sometimes that works out. Tibbs was very similar to the same way. And look at what Tibbs turned into for a head coach for the Chicago Bulls. And that's really what I compare Micah Nori to a lot, because he has the known for defensive acumen. When it comes down to it, he was one of the guys that people thought was the front runner for the head coach back when Matt Lloyd was expected to land the executive role, right? His background and coaching history are things that make him extremely, extremely strong in regards to that. He's been an assistant with the Raptors, the Kings, the Nuggets, and Pistons, and the Timberwolves, right? And he's one of the top assistants under Chris Finch. And, regardless of the Minnesota Timberwolves not being able to get over that hump after 2 trips to the Western Conference Finals, and it fell short this year, I think that's still a team that's built, that's played well in an X's and O's standpoint. He's widely viewed around the league as a good communicator, a motivator, and he builds really good relationships with players and with the front office. And that's really what you want to see there, right? So he would bring the energy, bring the history, all that type of stuff to the Chicago Bulls, and that's good. His development range, which is something I look at with all these guys, is that he's worked with a bunch of players in regards to it. He's been, tied to, of course, helping, players that have become his stars. So he has a really good history with development. So take a look at that one, but it does feel like more of a safe option, right? Then let's talk about Dave Bliss. This was the guy that was on this list that I was the least familiar with. I spent about 4 hours putting together the topics and the research for this episode, and a lot of that was spent on researching Dave Bliss because the other guys I had already kind of talked about on the show before, right? Bliss is probably the biggest upside swing here, right? And we've already heard Bryson Graham has said it. Michael Reinsdorf said it after firing AK. Is emulating the OKC Thunder is not a bad thing for any franchise to do. This guy comes from there, right? When you look at it, he's one of the younger assistants in this. I think he's 37 years old. He's younger than me, right? He started off in the video room, worked his way up to player development, coming up with schemes, those type of things. You always love guys that can work themselves up basically from nothing to get to the point they were. One of the reasons why a lot of people like Matt Lloyd, for example, for the executive, is he worked himself up from an unpaid intern to running a basketball team, right? So, he comes from one of the best developmental organizations in basketball. I always say this: OKC is the standard of modern team building. When you look at, getting and stacking a bunch of picks, actually developing that talent well, OKC has done that. The Spurs are right there with them as well, right? So because he comes from that, he brings a lot of that with him too. I think that he fits a team that is rebuilding with young talent because he can relate to that talent, and he's dynamic enough in his coaching philosophies and stuff like that he can open up. The one unproven thing with him is that he's never been in a position to be a head coach before. So, of course, you worry about that leader of men quality and stuff like that. Like, I know that my Bears fans are going to be reminded of when we were going after Ben Johnson. It was one of the things that we fit. But I think Dave Bliss overall fits this organization, because Bryson Graham is building a young, dynamic front office. This is a guy that has the coaching system to do that as well, right? He's best known for player development, modern schemes, preparation, teaching, and with going and looking at some of the things that he's been given credit for, with the OKC, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander gave him a lot of credit for their championship run and what they were able to do. So if that holds to be true, nobody's going to really say something negative, but if that holds to be true, there's good. Now, the thing with him is he's not a big public personality, right? He's not that big personality. And so, if that matters for people, then it is what it is. I care more about the job you get done more so than if you have a big personality on the sidelines. But for some Bulls fans, after Billy Donovan not necessarily blowing up or getting in ref's face, they want to see somebody a little bit more fiery. I don't know if he's going to do that, right? But then also there's that question on how much, even if he's been given credit for Mike Dangholt, from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, how much of what the system that was built in OKC is why he's able to thrive, and if he has to build that own system himself, there's some questions there. But I think this is the biggest upside swing here. If you bet on the unproven voice to lead your team, you better get it right. But Dave Bliss, from everything that I've been able to research and see, Dave Bliss is a guy that I would love being the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. So Dave Bliss, a guy that definitely stands out as one of the younger guys as well. He may not be the loudest name, but the Bulls want a modern development-first coach. I think this is the name that everybody needs to do their research on, because Dave Bliss is a name that stands out. At the end of this segment, I'm going to rank the best fits I feel for the Chicago Bulls. We'll get into that. Dave Bliss, I'm going to tell y'all, is going to be high on that list. Next up, Tiago Splitter. This is the guy that is the wild card in this. And I say the wild card, and people are going to think, well, Haize, what do you mean by wild card? We just saw him coach the Portland Trailblazers to an above 500 record. They went to the playoffs. They have a young team. We saw Denny Advia develop, Scoot Henderson develop, Donovan Clingan develop under the one season with him. And that's all true. And that is why he is on this list, because of those things, right? a guy that's a former NBA champion himself, an NBA assistant, an international head coach. One of the things that's really good about Tiago Splitter is that, and somebody may, when you hear this, let me finish this, don't react to me saying this, is that he doesn't have the most complex offensive system, right? But that's because he merges NBA basketball and international basketball in the way that he coaches. You see that for people that watch, and not just, I don't mean just when the Olympics are on, when you watch international basketball, if you go and watch any Euro League, you will see how those thought processes and methodologies played out with the Portland Trailblazers. But it wasn't just that. I think the fact that he, played in the NBA, he's able to mix and mold those two worlds. I think that is where the NBA is going. It's mixing the European style with NBA philosophies and getting the best of both worlds and doing that. That's what he does in regards to, he has a modern offensive building when it comes down to that one. He's known for emphasizing pace, simplicity, clarity, and quick decision making, right? Which plays into whether you want to play fast or get into the half court, that type of stuff. His offensive approach is mainly built around the players not overthinking, but using them to their strengths. They play fast, they read the floor. A guy like Josh Giddey, who does all those things naturally, could really thrive under a Tiago Splitter if he's here long term, and Bryson Graham sees that. So I think that that's part of the best appeal for him there. Of course, some of the concerns around him is, he was able to build off of what Chauncey Billups laid out there, right? The Portland Trailblazers weren't the worst team. They weren't the best team either. They had some shortcomings, even though, like I said, they had to overcome injuries. Two of their major players were injured for large parts of the season, and they still found a way to be successful and make the playoffs with all the drama going on, dealing with a similarly bad owner and cheap owner. Tiago Splitter did all that. And there's something to be said, I think, personally, about having a guy that you see has already had to deal with adversity, and the fact that he dealt with that pretty damn well. So, I got to give it credit for that. I like Tiago Splitter. I know a lot of Bulls fans love Tiago Splitter and his possibility here because they saw it, right? And I think that's a good thing. Now, the Portland Trailblazers didn't rank in the top half of the league offensively. They were the 13th best defensive ranked team. But then again, because they were missing so much of their roster, so many big important pieces of their roster, I look and I think Tiago Splitter did an amazing job as a head coach. He's a guy that I would really like into this. And then you have the two safer picks, right? I think both James Borrego and Wes Unseld Jr. are safer picks, right? Like Wes Unseld, because he's already been here, the benefits of him, he has the voice, he's strong communicator, those type of things, and an internal candidate. But I do feel like that it feels like playing it too safe if you go to Wes Unseld Jr. And James Borrego, while he does have, of course, prior head coaching experience, this is a guy that's very offensive minded. He has worked with young players, but there's defensive issues everywhere that he's been coaching wise. Every single stop that he's had, there's been major defensive issues to that. So I think that, I don't know if you want to play it safe when you're trying to reset a culture with the Chicago Bulls. And that's what James Borrego and Wes Unseld Jr. feel like to me, right? But then, of course, there's some surprising names, right? A lot of people have brought up Jason Kidd and want him to be included. I do think this. Jason Kidd has done a really good job developing. You look at what he did early on with Giannis, what he did with Cooper Flagg, those type of things. But then at the same time, we have heard that Jason Kidd wants some front office power. And you've already given that to Bryson Graham. He's hired his right hand. I don't know if that makes it a non-starter for him to come to the Chicago Bulls or even really be interested in that position, but it could be, right? And we'll see what happens there. Rajon Rondo, a fan favorite, right? But reportedly not on the Chicago Bulls list. Now, he has interviewed for other jobs. It could be that he's expected to get one of those jobs. We'll see. But with the Pelicans already hiring their coach in Jamal Mosley, that was where Rondo was kind of most commonly mocked to. Could go to the Orlando Magic, stuff like that, but it is. Chris Quinn, one of my favorite. He's one of the best assistants in basketball. He was also left off the list. But I do think that's because there is some rumblings and some talk that within the next few years, Pat Riley could step down, which could mean Eric Spoelstra could go to the front office. Chris Quinn could naturally take over as the head coach in Miami. So therefore, maybe that's not going to be the most, that's why he's not really interviewing for a lot of positions, even though he's been reported as being, a person of interest by other jobs, but he's never really interviewed for one, at least not recently. So there you go on that one. Sam Cassell, he does feel overdue for an opportunity to be a head coach somewhere, but apparently not on the Chicago Bulls. And then the last two names that were mentioned by Jake Fisher were Lamar Skeeter and Ryan Schmidt as names that were added to watch out for that could be added to the Chicago Bulls list. They, Jake Fisher added that a couple of hours after the fact that those are guys that could be added in regards to that. And, it is what it is when it comes down to that. If that's the case, It is Lamar Skeeter is currently an assistant with the Charlotte Hornets, and then Ryan Schmidt is currently with the Atlanta Hawks, which I wonder if they're, well, clearly Bryson Graham came from Atlanta, so there's probably some familiarity there as well. So when we're talking about all of this, what are the best overall fits for me? This is my list, not your list. So don't say, hey, Haize, you should actually had number one. This person number one. That wouldn't be my list. That's your list. Now leave your list down in the comment section. That's perfectly fine. But my personal list, after doing my research, Dave Bliss is probably number one on this. I believe he has the highest upside if the Bulls are very serious about player development, becoming the focus here. Coming from Oklahoma City, that system there, I think it's modern. It's a player growth focused profile as well down there. Dave Bliss has probably leapfrogged into my number one. Sean Sweeney is my number two. You can look at it maybe as 1A, 1B. I think if we walk away with Dave Bliss or Sean Sweeney as our head coach, we're good. Sean Sweeney, what he has as far as clear identity building and standard building and what he's done with the San Antonio Spurs, albeit working under Mitch Johnson, I like what Sean Sweeney could potentially bring here for the Chicago Bulls a lot. My third on the list, Tiago Splitter. I think that there's something to be said about seeing him actually do it with the Portland Trail Blazers this year that you have to give him credit for. He's my number three guy on this list. Number four is Micah Nori because I do like the similarities between him and Tom Thibodeau. I think that those are things that stand out. And then James Borrego and Wes Unseld down to the bottom of my tier list overall. But I'll say this. If the Bulls want a true identity shift and want to build from a winning culture, Sean Sweeney and Dave Bliss stand out the most. I really think that that's the case into it. Sweeney not only brings the defensive backbone and accountability, I think Bliss also gives them a modern kind of blueprint to go there. And then Tiago Splitter as the wild card for a fresh start to come to Chicago and build off what he did in being the interim head coach with the Portland Trail Blazers. And for the people that are saying Portland's not going to let him go, I need y'all to actually look up what Portland's doing. But that's the head coaching search. That's what's going on. I want to shift before we get out of here. I want to talk about some of the winners and losers from the draft combine and how it plays out for the Chicago Bulls. Number one, you got to talk about Cameron Carr. Cameron Carr is probably one of the biggest standouts in this overall out of the draft combine. I think what he did in having a 38-inch standing vertical, a 42.5-inch max vertical, the second best overall in this draft class. He measured at 6'5", barefoot with a 7'1" wingspan. And you talk about a guy that could literally develop into a 3-level scorer, but has the defensive backbone. This is a guy that was projected to be at the end of the first round, and now his combine may have pushed him out of the Bulls' range. He could potentially go well before 15 and go in the lottery now. And it's similar to what we saw happen with Cedric Howard last year. So a guy and if you look at a lot of mocks, they have Cameron Carr going to the Bulls at 15, but I think a lot of that's going to have to play out for the Bulls, and it may not happen. Another winner that could play into the Bulls is Baba Miller. This is a guy that was one of the best big men at the combine overall. He led the first scrimmage with 20.6 rebounds, 2 threes as well. I do think that when you look at the 29% that he shot, in 4 seasons in college, if he can develop a legit 3-point shot, that's great. Then when you look at in game 4, 13 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists in game 4, 6'10.5" with a 7'1" wingspan. He has the size, he has the skill. Baba Miller is somebody that people need to start taking account for, because I tell you what, you're probably going to start seeing his name go in these mocks. And is that a bit of a reach for the Bulls at number 15? Yeah, but look out for him in the second round. But hey, you may have to just take the talent and deal with it, because that guy has unicorn upside. I think you still have to sign a veteran center this offseason, and that's perfectly fine. But Baba Miller is a guy that, I tell you what, I didn't even have him on my board coming into this. And now, hey, Baba Miller is a guy that absolutely has stood out in this draft combine. And I wouldn't be mad. Now, sometimes those draft combine risers late, they end up not working out, but I like a guy like Baba Miller. Chris Nick Jr., a guy that you guys know has been one of my favorite options for the Chicago Bulls. In a draft that's kind of thin at the center spot, Chris Nick Jr. really stood out in the draft combine. It did nothing but to help him. He measured at 6'10", at a 7'5" wingspan, his standing reach of 9 feet. His vertical leap was the best amongst centers, right? And then also some of the things that stood out about him was his switchability. Reportedly, people at the draft combine were very impressed with how he switched out to guards out on the perimeter. He's been compared to say that he has a similar offensive skill set to Khalil Ware, with maybe a little bit lower of a ceiling there, but we'll see what's going to happen. But Chris Nick Jr. had himself a great draft combine. Also, and I'm going to mention this just because, he's one of the guys that could go at number 4 to the Bulls, Cam Boozer. Cam Boozer and how he, like, people, myself included, talked about his lack of athleticism. He ranked right up there with anybody else in the athletic testing. And so because of that, with also what he did, zero wasted motion, all that type of stuff, he did nothing but help himself, and you see what is going to happen there. Morez Johnson has done himself a wonder in this draft combine. Somebody who was initially expected to go towards the end of the first. There's some people that have even said he could go in the lottery in this. Now, I don't know if I believe that. I think there's a little bit of sensationalism in that, but he's 6'9" barefoot, 7'4" wingspan, 251 pounds he weighed in, a 39 max vertical as well. This is another guy could definitely be on the Chicago Bulls board at pick number 15 as well, if he falls there. And now we may be lucky if he even falls there when it comes down to that part of it as well. And then some of the guys that actually fell in this draft combine that the Bulls could still take a look at there, number 15, LeBaron Fillion as well. His measuring in at 6'3" barefoot, 176 pounds. This is a guy that a lot of you guys have brought up, but his draft combine has left him in a spot where he could very well fall to the end of the first round. It doesn't necessarily mean the Chicago Bulls, but here's a guy that could fall as well. And then another guy is Yaxel Lindenberg. Like, this is a guy that was the second best player in college basketball last year, but a lot of the draft combine analysts did say that he didn't have the strongest draft combine, despite having a 39 max inch vertical, which I think is a good one, 250 pounds, 7'5" wingspan, 6'9" when it comes down to all of that. But overall, I feel like this, like, Yaxel Lindenberg, like, we know who he is as a player, right? Like, yeah, 24 years old, but I do think because of, like, his teammate Morez Johnson and stuff like that, like, all that stuff is now dropped him a little bit when it comes down to it. But I think overall, once he gets to the private workouts, he's going to work that on. He's going to move back up the draft boards personally. I don't think there's, like, any chance for him to be there at 15 for the Bulls personally, but we'll see if I'm wrong on that. I've been wrong before. But that's my time for today, y'all. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, man. Make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. Let us know your thought process on everything down below. On the coaching search, who's your favorite coach? Who stands out to you? Who's somebody that you absolutely do not want to see on the Chicago Bulls finalist list for a head coach out of the names that we've heard? It's probably going to be 2, maybe even 3 rounds of interviews. We'll see what's going to happen in regards to that one. In my opinion, I don't want the Bulls. The safest name is not always the right name, and the best name isn't always the biggest name, and the Bulls are just going to have to pay attention to all of that as they try to piece this thing together this offseason. But let me know your guys' thoughts down below. You can follow us at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.